Hi everyone. Today I'm making fig bars, and it's kind of like a fig sandwich, like a preserve sandwich. These are homemade fig preserves, and I've rolled out two pieces of sugar cookie dough onto two small silicone mats. I baked one almost to the full amount that it said to bake it, and you can see in the middle there that cookie dough is not really set. I would bake this a little more because when they came out of the oven at the very end, the ones in the middle were very soft, and I actually had to put them back in the oven for a little bit. So when you're doing this, make sure that the first layer, because you rolled, like I said, two silicone mats, half of the dough goes on each one, roll it out evenly, use dowels to roll it out. I have links to articles showing how to do that in the description of this video. But you want to make sure that the dough, the fig jam might have been a little thin or thick in the middle. I'm not sure, but the center didn't really bake. I'm also using insulated cookie sheets, which does tend to make them bake slower. So you want to bake half of the dough by itself, bring it out, cover it with the jam like this, and then we're going to get the other half of the dough that's been sitting in the freezer on the silicone mat and put it on top. So the first layer is already baked, but I would bake it longer than I did, and so pretty much bake the cookie dough sheet like it's almost done, because it won't burn because it's going to have so much stuff on top of it like this. So just make sure that you put the fig jam or whatever jam you're using. You can do this with other types of jam. Just cover the whole sheet on the bottom. Try to get the jam on there evenly because that's going to affect how it bakes also. So after I'm done with this, I got the second sheet of dough and I put it on top. I had it in the freezer so that it would harden up. I turned it over onto the jam and then I peeled it off. Since it's on a silicone mat, you can just put it down like this. And I just kind of centered it because the bottom one had spread a little bit in the oven. And then you just carefully peel this off. That's the reason that I put it in the freezer. And it will come off the silicone mat pretty evenly. So once you've done this, you put it back in the oven. And you might worry, like I said, you might worry that the bottom isn't going to like cook or isn't going to bake without burning, but it'll be okay. I had to leave this in the oven a lot longer than I thought I did. So just watch it. And when it looks like, see, the edges look like they're brown. The center is not baked. So like I said, I ended up having to put these back into the oven. But just take something, and since it's still on the silicone mat, you can't use a knife. You shouldn't use a pizza roller that's really sharp. You have to use something that's not so sharp. So I was using just a bench scraper, and I cut the cookies into bars or like into sections, and it was really soft. And see, I have a little cloth that I'm cleaning off the edge of the bench scraper because it was just so soft that it was getting stuck, and you really do need to clean this off. If it is so soft that it's causing you problems, put it back in the oven and just bake it for another 5 minutes or so. And then you're going to do the same thing on the way across the other way. And you can see how the dough is kind of pulling up. And especially as you get into that middle, the edges obviously are going to cook faster. And one thing that I would suggest doing with any kind of cookies that are just not baking is take the ones off of the edges that are baked, put those on the cooling rack, and then put the middle ones back in the oven. You can do that. You don't have to have everything bake exactly the same length of time. Be careful as you're doing this because that filling is hot, and you can let them cool off a little bit. You're not going to get as straight a cut. But like I said, these were so soft, it didn't really matter. I should have probably let them cool off before I did this. And then you have to carefully pull them out onto the cooling rack. And I did pull the silicone mat. You can pull the silicone mat off and just put the whole thing on the cooling rack and then let it sit. That would make it easier to handle also. But because of the preserves on these, it just keeps the cookies so soft that they were really, so you can tell that these are not baked all the way through. And they are going to harden up. They will harden up as they sit and cool. But depending on what kind of a dough you're using, I used a regular sugar cookie dough. It might end up being a really soft cookie, which is fine. I like the soft cookies. I don't like super crispy cookies, but if you're looking for something that's really, really crispy, I would put these back in the oven. And see, as I'm taking these off, I'm having to separate them with the spatula because they're so sticky and they're just holding together. So give yourself time, be patient. I was not. And I think if you let these cool off, if you bake them a little longer and you let them cool off, you're going to have a harder cookie at the end. I personally like them a little softer, so I wasn't worried about doing this. but it did make it more difficult to take it off the sheet while they were still hot. You can let it cool off. I mean, like I said, I was being very impatient with this. And this is me taking more off. I think I did finally say, I'm just going to let these cool off. And I did put those back in the oven. I put the center ones back in the oven for another 5 minutes, I believe. And it did help a little bit. But, you know, you just have to be patient, make sure they're all baked. And they're really good. But they can end up being really soft. And I did mention this is an insulated cookie sheet, and that it does tend to bake things a little slower. So you might have to extend your baking time. And the reason that I'm showing you this is because, you know, I'm not going to pretend like this was easy. These were a little tricky. They were very fiddly. You had to be careful because the bottoms, if they weren't 100% baked, they didn't want to stay, you know, they're soft. So they wanted to kind of fall apart. They weren't falling apart, but they definitely were not like a hard cookie. And I know they're going to harden up as they cool, but it's just a soft, chewy cookie. And I got about 40 out of this batch. They are so good. So go try it, but take your time.